Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Occult podcast. The podcast where we do, or at least talk about, inadvisable things in the name of magical science. I am, as always, Tyler Cadmian, aka Shadow, and with me, as always...
This is Felix S's for Sequel Warren.
Yes, we've got a sequel. Apparently, last episode was a time travel tipsy to-do.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got another guest who's going to be coming in to talk about time travel. Before that, do you have anything to talk about when it comes to the episode?
This episode?
Last episode.
Last episode. Is there anything in particular that you mean? I'm blanking a little.
I have not been able to listen to it at all.
Oh, I've listened once, and some others have come up in me and listened to it. I think Venom's listened to it once.
Mm-hmm.
In me, and Rob has, actually.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
and he's our guest.
Yes. So, some of it's a little hard to remember for me. Some of the topics get a little hard to think about.
Right.
There's some of that stuff in there that actually Venom came up and did some writing in me recently, and in my body.
Yeah.
And tried to write out some more of the manual.
Mm-hmm.
And managed to get a little bit.
Yeah.
And at some point you'll see that, actually.
Mm-hmm.
He has a blog, Time Traveler as in fuck you. And so he does post material to there.
Yeah.
I do want to try experimenting to see if I can get any manual pages, and if others who can come up can try and see what's their access level, basically.
Right. Yeah, that's part of the interesting thing is that with the Peacock Planet being a channeled work, there's times where people are going to find out things about their past that they may not consciously remember. It's some sort of trauma processing that you don't have to do within your own brain, in a way that I find very interesting.
Yeah, actually, Venom can come over here, go through some traumatic memories of his, literally, if he was going through them as in going through a video.
Mm-hmm.
Work on some writing or art regarding it, and then go back to his own body, and he didn't have to use his own brain to go through the memories that.
Right, yeah, because it's been a very interesting thing, and it's part of the reason, get a little bit behind the scenes here, it's part of the reason why some of these entities actually agree to work with us, is because this is the kind of thing that, is able to be done in exchange.
Yeah, there's, trauma processing that is not really available to them, either in the situations they're in or in the places that they're at, or sometimes it's just being available just happens to be a serendipity thing.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to me, I specifically have trained myself up to be able to train other people to do art or writing whenever they occupy me.
Right.
And so that's kind of part of the program, I guess, is basically hey, you come over here, you do some art, we see what it is that you like to do. Is there a story that you want to tell? Is there some stuff that you're trying to get out that you don't know how?
Mm-hmm.
Then we'll figure out how to do it, because psychic art is basically
your
my
jam.
specialty. Yeah. And I want to teach.
Jam.
I want to teach and enable other people to do psychic art, and sometimes I do that by just offering up my body and brain as an art school. Yeah, I know it sounds weird, but I gotta talk about it very frankly.
Yeah. No, and I mean, we are having basically a second part of time travel episode. This podcast, but next podcast is actually going to be talking more about the
shared body experience,
the stuff that nobody likes to talk about. You know, like, what do you do when you're in someone else's body and you got to go to the bathroom?
Well, just like, yeah, it's going to be the nuts and bolts of what it is we're doing and how we're doing it.
Yeah, like, and,
this isn't something that we only do on the podcast. This permeates every part of our life.
The podcast is an extension of our life. We kind of have to have this kind of lifestyle in order to have this kind of podcast.
Yeah.
And so next episode is going to be a bit behind the scenes of that. So we've been talking about this, so it's coming up early, which is fitting for the start of a time travel podcast.
It is.
So, time travel. I mean, we got into it a little bit about, like, our respective histories with time travel and some of that stuff, but, like, is there anything else you want to get into?
I've been really interested to see how it will be different between Venom and Rob talking about this topic, because they have very different approaches to this topic.
Definitely. To
this actual discipline, and also they have different experiences that they're drawing from.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's a little hard to say anything otherwise. Actually, one of the things that Rob had found while trying to figure out what to say about this subject on this podcast is that time travel is hard to talk about.
It is. It is.
And I find time travel very difficult to talk about.
It is very difficult to talk about. It's difficult for me to talk about, even though I have experienced it. Like, in my own life, I have, like, psychically, energetically, I don't even know how to say it, but, like, I have gotten memories from future stuff. It's not just, like, precognizance or anything. It's literally talking to my future self or to my past self. And some of those, like, I've had one half of the connection when I was very young, and then the other half where I was the future self much later on. And it's difficult to discuss, mostly because a lot of the stuff that was couched in the future was during a time where we had a bunch of methane around.
Yeah.
And so it's difficult to talk about because usually it's couched in times or in places when you're not in a good position to talk about things. And even afterwards, it sounds a little bit too much unreality, I guess.
I find it interesting, like, we are on the other side of a 3-year time gap.
Yeah.
We had a lot of people show up in each of our respective bodies around 2022. And, like, maybe into 2021, and then basically say, yeah, so I'm pretty sure next time that I, like, talk with you is, like,
3 years later.
3 years from here. And it's like, what?
And we're like, what do you mean?
What?
And then we went through the subsequent 3 years, and now we're on the other side of it, and we're like, yeah.
I'm so glad that we're on the other side, but wow. It's not the first time I've experienced something like this. Mm-hmm. I have experienced both sides of a 9-year time gap.
Yeah.
I have experienced, like, a lot of different time warpy stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you kind of have to accept when it happens on either side of it is that that's something that can happen. That we go through linear time for some of our experience, but the nature of time is that you can have two events that are directly linked to each other be years apart.
Yeah.
And that your actual memory of both ends of those events can also be very linked together.
Yes.
And still be years apart.
Yes. And it's very much, I mean, we talked about it last episode, This Is How You Lose the Time War, does display some of these, but I feel like, again, that writing only aspect is keeps it in a way of linearity that's like not. I think the closest thing that you could do to emulate that in book form would be a choose your own adventure.
I think that there's still some more non-linear things that they could have done with that story,
Yeah.
but it was about novella length, and it really seemed like they went through about maybe 3 layers of edits.
Yeah.
And probably had already discussed kind of what their time travel twist would be from the get-go. They were using the letter writing gimmick a lot.
Yeah.
I've read some books that were not choose your own adventure, that did not have you move yourself back and forth between different pages and stuff, that managed to do some of the time loopy, time branchy, just time effing wonky shit. And I think that the authors themselves were just doing time travel to be able to write.
So what just popped into my head was the Retief novels.
Oh man, the Retief novels. So those are all spy fiction. I was thinking of the Illuminatus trilogy.
Ah.
That's the Illuminatus trilogy and the Schrodinger's Cat trilogy. Robert Anton Wilson, and then the first one is co-written by Robert Shea. Yes, there's like a lot of Robert here. Boy, you're gonna love today's guest. So, they managed to write some things involving causality, time travel, just generally plot line, involving their characters, and there's several different alternate versions of the characters and alternate universes interacting in the story at the same time, that, like, I just don't think they mapped it all out ahead of time. I think that they were just really in tune with each other and maybe doing a lot of acid. Otherwise, I know that they're chaos magicians, and they were definitely working with some time travel in their own capacity, and I think that they just folded that work into their fiction work, and it did the hard part, and they didn't even have to figure out how to write about time travel. It just wrote itself.
Right.
So while we're experiencing all this weird stuff, why not make
a
fiction
podcast.
work? Make a podcast. And then make an extended length fiction work that just gets warped by the reality twist itself. And that's my Pulitzer.
So, for, like, also, because part of this podcast is an experiment in and of itself, we'd like to note that methane boxes are almost gone.
Almost gone. Yeah, and we've been improving as it's been happening.
Yeah. Haven't really listened back to too many of the podcasts, but we did listen back to some of the earlier ones, and it's like you can tell, like, when we started really, because there's a time where, like, yes, we had a lot of the boxes in the place that we're staying at, but we weren't touching them, we weren't moving them, we weren't touching the things in them. But when we started moving them...
Yeah. There was a certain time period, actually, where it wasn't that we were moving them. It was that it got really cold and we couldn't ventilate anymore.
Yeah.
We couldn't open the windows anymore. And so everything built up. And then they got moved a little bit. And there was like kind of a window where there was just like a lot of methane exposure. But what's interesting to me is that we don't just have methane exposure to answer for behavior during the podcast.
Right.
Because I've listened through, there was one episode in particular where we had very high methane exposure. That one was on divination, and Umbra was the guest. And there's definitely some reactivity to the methane. I'm the only one in the methane during that one because you were in a hotel room.
Right.
Getting away from that. So, but if you listen to Venom's episode, he's obviously reacting to something he's experiencing mentally involving time travel.
Right.
And
no, it's so different.
It's separate from the methane influence.
Well, not only that, not only the Umbra episode, but we also have episode 6 when we first realized, oh shoot, we got doused with methane, inundated with methane. Let's record an episode just to have, like, this is what Felix and Tyler are like on methane.
Yeah.
So being able to know that and then notice that separately from that, Venom was having what we generally call abreactions. Like, he was repeating himself. He was forgetting things and then remembering things. Like, but it was in a way in which he was trying to continue a conversation from himself.
And it's very interesting listening to it. He's listened back to it himself and noticed where he was having the abreactions.
Yeah.
But he had the experience of, like, he was in me, and the first, like, the time that he was actually recording the podcast, he was in me, so he was listening back. He was in this brain when he said those things.
Right.
And his memory of it is so much different.
Right.
Than, say, like, other podcast guests have been on and done the same thing. Like, Umbra remembers her stuff much better than Venom remembers his episode.
Yeah.
So, yeah, stuff like that is actually, I think, Rob may be commenting on that.
Yeah. No, it's just something that I like to bring up because, like...
Venom actually has a medical case when it comes to time travel that we're actively investigating.
Yeah. And, I mean, unfortunately, some of the ways to diagnose it is to expose him to electronics and recording devices.
Well, and also just to interview him on the experience in an environment that takes him away from the usual stressors and allows him to experience it in a brain that's not the brain that experienced all of the time travel trauma directly.
Right.
So, like, yeah, go science.
Go science. And I just, like, want to reiterate, this is the Bad Occult Podcast. We're doing inadvisable things. All right, so I think that's about wrap up for, like, what we thought of last episode and a lot of, like, just stuff in general. But yes, we have already mentioned our guest of the podcast is Rob. He's going to talk about his experiences with time travel and background and things like that. So Felix is going to go ahead and...
I'm going to bring Rob over. I'll see y'all later.
Red Rover, send Rob right over. So, very excited. Rob is excited as well. I can see him getting ready. He's got notes. Just letting you guys know, you can't see this because this is
0
audio only format, but he's got notes. So, we heard him 0. He's getting ready. Probably talk here in a minute, but this is Rob. Welcome back to the podcast, Rob.
Hey, Felix brought my hat in.
Yeah.
That's a nice surprise. I wasn't expecting that.
Hat. So, just to remind anyone who's, like, not listened from the beginning, you said your name is Rob. Pronouns.
Hey, it's Rob. It's he, his.
When
I want.
What do you do?
I currently I live with Ben, actually.
Yes. Status update.
Ben and I are married.
Status update.
Ben and I are on the same planet, and we're married. That's the Mageville planet that he was interviewed about by Felix. So
you moved.
I did. I
from
moved.
The ship.
I managed to pull some strings and get over there, so that over here now, so that he and I could move in together and get hitched as soon as possible.
Congratulations.
I don't want to make too much of everything about that, but I haven't really said much of anything about that on the podcast, and it's a big part of my life now.
Yeah.
Also, I just like to acknowledge, like, I talk to Ben a lot, and we talk about, like, say, for instance, my topic today is going to be time travel. Like, sometimes I talk with him about it. And right now, since I'm on, Mageville's, we call it Mageville, but it's really called Ark Rock. Right now I'm on Arc Rock, and time works a lot differently here. So sometimes I might just mention some stuff that he's explained to me.
Yeah. So, yay! Status update. And let's see. I already said where you're calling in from, but we're going to be talking about time travel. So, why you and why time travel?
Oh my gosh, why me?
Why you?
I want to explain why time travel first. Venom wanted to do an episode about time travel.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that Venom wanted to do in and of itself. And then y'all wanted to have Umbra on for that episode where you knew that would be high methane exposure in Felix's body.
Yeah.
Because Umbra does not well, but amongst all of us, she holds up the best under the exposure to methane.
Yeah.
She has dealt with some other chemical exposure in her past that has allowed her to have techniques that we simply just don't.
And I really appreciated it because it was also testing, like, doing remote mic work, so that was, like, two things at once that went very well that could have gone very badly, so.
It was a very interesting podcast, and she got to say some very interesting things during that podcast that she might not have otherwise said because she was exposed to that. But that meant that she kind of led with the topic of time travel when it came to divination and oracular stuff. And then Venom would be following her up, which he did.
Right. And now we're on 3.
And the reason I'm on 3 is because I also wanted to talk about time travel. But as well, like, at some point we considered just having a joint episode where both Venom and I talked about time travel.
Mm-hmm.
And then Venom decided he was good for a full episode, which he definitely was.
Yeah.
So, yeah. My experience of time travel is a lot different than Venom's.
Mm-hmm.
I have a much different background than his. Like, for instance, he talked about how a lot of people start time travel by time travel kind of happens to them, and they just kind of get dragged into it, and that's definitely the case for me. Time travel often happens to me more than I happen to it. And that's really common for people, and it's okay.
Yeah.
If you have a certain... so time travel often happens due to the disruption of magnetic fields, electromagnetism, electric activity, but yeah, magnetic field disruption... it happens, and then time travel happens. So if you, as a person, have a magnetic field that experiences disruptions often, that can happen, and it's okay. I'm here to tell you, this is not your fault that you just often end up in time warps.
Ah, so this is advice from a time traveler to time travelers.
If you are the type of person to end up in time warps often with no explanation ahead of time, and they're always different kinds, and it's always, it's not preventable stuff, and people start getting annoyed with you how much it happens, and annoyed with the fact that you always have an excuse. Your electromagnetic field is drawn naturally to the disruption of electromagnetic fields, to actual time warps. Or it draws time warps to itself.
Ooh.
It really depends on which point of view you look at it from.
Oh my goodness.
So this is one of the reasons why people say that time travel is addictive, is because it's a little bit it's not quite like substance abuse. This is a substance that stalks you. You've got to find a way to propitiate it. You've got to offer something to it in exchange for what it seems to have on you.
Appease the time monster.
You have to give it something. It will come after you. And so we all do some sort of time work in some way to kind of, I don't want to say appease the beast, because this is something that I participate in willingly. But it's also something that happens to my magnetic field whether or not I like it. And I did recently have a few things happen that I just think don't need to have happened. And just once I'd like to be the guy that does things on purpose all the time. like for like 24 hours.
Well, maybe that is in the cards for the future.
Maybe it is.
Maybe if you stop your time traveling.
Maybe if I stop my time travel.
And then...
Maybe if I make my magnetic field be different.
It's getting very, like, close into the realm of victim blaming.
I'm not
sure if I'm comfortable with it.
I wanted to talk about how, if time travel just sort of happens to you often, how to deal with it.
Yeah.
How the hell to healthily deal with this. And a lot of it is about recognizing opportunities and yes-anding reality. Mm-hmm. Like, if you can just take the lead sometimes even and see what happens. Because a lot of times it can seem like you are in a story that you're just like waiting for the next beat. You're waiting for the next thing to happen and the next participant to give you the next tip or whatever. But what happens when you try to take the lead? Mm-hmm. Do things bounce against you? And that's information. Or, can you actually, like, change the direction of things? Because, like, sometimes the reason time travel is happening to you is because that's your next in. That is the next thing that happens to you. So, go for it. Mm-hmm. Whatever it is. Just see if you can actually work with what it is that is happening, and when it comes to your own story, at least make yourself the main character again. Yeah, in a good, healthy way.
Yeah, that's a great point. When experiencing time travel symptoms, like just in my own life, like recentering on yourself is very important. I mean, there's also like the other extreme where like you can feel like so much of a main character that you fuck things up.
I actually, one of the notes that I took earlier whenever I was kind of writing on this to figure out what to say was
hands away from your face.
Sorry.
Hands away from your...
I don't know why I did that. Time travel tends towards narcissism.
Ah, that's why you did the hands on face.
Yeah. So this is embarrassing, but I do want to talk about it. Usually when a person time travels, as an individual especially, on their own, when they do time travel, their first point of reference is their own life. Yeah. So everything is going to be about you quite often when you time travel, because your most available time travel tool is your own life. Mm-hmm. So that is what you're working with.
Yeah. And realizing that is the case, kind of humbling actually, because it's like, okay, this is my like first couple of jumps, and then like my future self goes off to something better or different,
it's I often fall into it. Mm-hmm. And I kind of experience it from I often experience it with the I just landed here and I have no context for what's going on.
Oh no, sort of point of view. The Unico.
Yeah.
It's if anybody's ever experience.
If anybody's ever watched any of the Unico animated movies or read the manga by Tezuka, that is about a little baby unicorn who keeps on going from place to place with his memory wiped in between for his own safety.
Sad.
Under some sort of weird deity witness protection program. He's told ahead of time, like, yeah, you're going to go to a new place now. You're not going to remember any of these people. Can I at least say goodbye? No, you can't.
It's like the worst kind of isekai.
I was gonna say it's like an isekai,
but the worst kind, because you don't have your memories from like before.
So, let's talk about time travel memory transfer.
Yeehaw!
So if you're projecting, if you're not bringing your body with you, you're not bringing your brain with you, which means that you are projecting from body to body, and what you keep between in terms of your memories and your thoughts can be a real crapshoot. Right now, I'm actively projecting from a real brain that I have somewhere else.
Right.
So, whatever it is that I'm experiencing right now is more a case of, like, what I'd call active communications, and however those are disrupted. But when it comes to, like, making a full jump between selves, one to the other, the memories that you transfer from there to here, sometimes it's a matter of accessing them. But, man, they can be weird, and it can sometimes take years to access them.
Yeah.
From my experience.
So what pops to mind actually is Homestuck. Like the clouds above Skya that Prospect could see, and how Jade saw, or was it Jade or was it Jade? It was Jade. Was seeing all these clouds and getting these glimpses and like thinking that she understood what was going on, but then actually experiencing it, and it's a lot different. Like the clouds only showed a part of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so there was a lot of times where, you know, Jade would make decisions based on that partial knowledge, but coming to find out that, like, what was actually going on was very different.
And I mean, that is akin to the information you get from divination.
Yeah.
I mean, you're reading clouds whenever you're reading divination. And any kind of oracular kind of stuff, any kind of prophecy, that's all time travel, and that knowledge can only transfer so far. It's just like whenever you have personalities transfer from body to body, there's only so much that's brought over, because there's only so much you can bring over at once. There's only so much that the body and brain can change in how it
like
thinks,
chemically and like electrically, like every I mean, and we've studied this especially with Felix because of his you know, left prefrontal cortex having an actual hole in it. We keep bringing it up because it's a thing, and that, like, showing that reaction, or like how people handle it is different depending on whether you're actively channeling from a body or being a personality from another timeline, is very interesting.
Yeah. Sorry, I kind of lost the thread.
It's okay. Do you want to go ahead and go to another point then that you have?
Yeah, let me... Oh, so I want to talk a lot about... A lot. I really want to talk about time telescoping.
Oh, yes.
Something that happens a lot in our experience as a household, and also, I think, to other people. And time telescoping is very interesting because it is a kind of time travel, but as I'll explain, it kind of only goes one way. So... basically, now, how this works for me is not the way that I was taught how to do it. And I am technically having experiences that are averse to what it is that I was taught. But what I have experienced is that you can use your body's magnetic field to slow time. There's other ways that you can do it, but the magnetic field, I think, is the most reliable, and it's the most time-linked. So, when you use it to slow time, the thing about time is that, let's say that you go on a walk through the park.
Mm-hmm.
Then, like, later somebody might, like, think through that walk in the park that they have and remember it. And in that memory, they might actually kind of expand the time of the walk in the park.
Mm-hmm.
Because whenever you remember something, you can actually kind of add extra material.
Mm-hmm.
It's like memory expansion. You can walk through the memory and you can get kind of either alternate things that could have happened or just like more stuff that happens. You need to keep track of the original memory and the new memory, and what the differences are whenever you do this work, because it's really important to know what the other person that was with you definitely experienced.
Yes.
By the way,
yes.
The Homestuck goes into a lot of this.
Yes.
I feel it doesn't talk about it straight on, but like you can actually have this outside of dreams. You can have this in waking life.
We're gonna have a Homestuck MST3K style analysis.
We'll definitely have a Homestuck episode. I feel we could have several, but I know it will always get referenced. It is one of the few works I've seen reference this kind of experience of reality and just talk about it straight on as if people are just outright experiencing it, without too many analogies in the way. And I mean, like, all you have to do is just, be like, yeah, it's just like Homestuck, except I'm not playing that weird game they're playing where there's only 4 people in the world.
Yeah, because their world blew up.
Yeah, and something more unbelievable happened to us, and now look at President.
I love that you say this on today of all days.
Oh man, it's happening tomorrow, isn't it?
Yes.
I want a spaceship. I'm not keeping track.
You're not even on a spaceship anymore.
I'm sometimes. Well, okay.
You're not on a spaceship.
I can project my consciousness to the spaceship.
Oh
too.
Yeah, that.
So, sorry, I really identify with spaceship culture, so it's hard not to think spaceship first. So yeah, time telescoping. When you go back through those memories, you can kind of like insert more, which means that sometimes that those people who were going on the walk the first time
feel it.
They actually feel the time expand during that walk. For some reason, this trip like took a lot longer than we thought it was going to take. Or, wow, I didn't know it was this late. Blah blah blah. Why does it seem like we just keep on needing to take up more time during this walk? And that's an example of time telescoping. The thing about time telescoping and memory expansion is that it only works one way. You can only keep on making it expand more. It is a lot like magnetic tape, like cassette tapes or VHSs, where you play it, the tape heads keep on pulling the tape and slowly stretching it, and so over time it will stretch more and more, and the sound will become just a little bit lower and a little longer. The tape will warp and wobble just a little bit more and more. And
also, with that warp and wobble, there can be shadows or things that get inserted, especially in the background as the quality degrades. And so, that's a very good analogy for the kind of insertions.
Yeah. Actually, memory insertion would kind of look like if you take a VHS and then you copy something on top of something that's already on the material. You would have that sort of ghosting.
Yeah.
And then if you kind of figure out, if you look at it from the point of view of, how do I work out this memory so it's back to the first experience I had, or at least closer to that? How do I uncross this reality? It's kind of like take that video that it is that you see interposed, and how do you run that back? How do you do the AI fill-in to put in?
So, I've heard a term a couple of times before, time strangers.
Oh boy. Thank you for bringing that up. That is a completely different topic that I really wanted to talk about.
Oh, great.
So this is hard to straight on talk about because it's a secret club of time travelers. and we don't often get a chance to talk about it. And so I would like to talk about it with you. Now. So, the Time Strangers, there's not a lot of bragging rights that you get to have as a time traveler, because at some point you kind of have to let go of things like property and bodies if you do it long enough or do it to a certain extent. Like, at some point, you're going to go to an alternate reality where your body is different, or you're going to end up, like, being two of you and having to decide which of you gets to be in the future and which of you gets to go do something else.
Right.
And those are just a couple of examples of weird reality identity things that can happen to you. Today, if you time travel, or if time travel happens to you, because it could just, like, what if a future version of yourself decides to come back and, like, mess with your life? Time travel happened to you at that point. Mm-hmm. There's really no arguing with it, even though technically the you that happened to you is also you. It's a different you, and identity gets weird whenever you work with time travel. Mm-hmm. So, Time Strangers, we get the bragging rights that we're in the Time Strangers. So, basically, the Time Strangers sort of just meet somewhere. Mm-hmm. And you get to be a Time Stranger by showing up where the Time Strangers are.
How do you know where or when to show up?
You get good. This is kind of like to be in a certain club of stage magicians. You have to actually, like, trick one of them in a way that they've never been tricked before, or something like that. Mm-hmm. You have to show up at a meeting of the Time Strangers. That's your brag, is that you're there.
But someone who's already a member of the Time Strangers has to vet that. And, like, what?
Well, time travel is involved. So, what's the problem there?
The only way to prove that you're a Time Stranger is by showing up to a Time Stranger meeting, but you don't know where or when the meeting is unless you're a Time Stranger.
Yeah. Get in there. It's a paradox. This is like 4th level work.
Every time we talk, every time we have a podcast, Rob, you say something super casually that absolutely breaks my brain. And you're just like, what? Like it's hard?
That's the thing. When time travel happens to you, some of this stuff normalizes that I have to talk to somebody else about it to check and see where normal is.
Oh, great. I'm your litmus test?
Yeah, apparently. Congratulations.
Bad Occult podcast.
You are the control...
litmus test for psychics and time travelers and whatever else the fuck kind of entities that we end up interviewing.
Today you are the control group.
Oh, boy.
I am not.
I do not want to pick up that gauntlet.
So, next time he's on the podcast, you should ask Venom as well about the Time Strangers.
Oh, God.
Because I recognize him.
Oh, boy.
That's one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure that...
You both have a similar hat.
Yeah, we do. We share the hat over here.
Yeah, but like in your pictures.
We have a different hat, though.
Similar.
It is similar. It does follow a certain dress code, you may notice.
I am doing so much...
I believe that we have shared a workplace or two.
I am doing so much side-eye and, like, what the fuckness.
Okay.
I feel like you threw out a message or a gauntlet for people who's not me on my podcast.
No. That's not what I meant to do. I didn't at all. I thought that the Time Strangers would be interesting because I don't really know how many other people actually out there who could listen to the podcast know about it or
I don't know if I'm,
it.
like, offended because I'm, like, my brain's breaking even trying to think about it again or, like, yeah, it's... You hoodwinked me.
I did not mean to. Oh my gosh.
I'm joking.
I
do feel a little bit bamboozled, and it's a very interesting reaction to have.
Okay. I certainly didn't mean to bamboozle you.
Yeah.
So
obviously, I don't think I'm part of the Time Strangers because I'm completely confused.
I did not think that you were part of the Time Strangers.
So
I wanted to tell you about the Time Strangers.
Apparently you can't tell me about the Time Strangers if I'm not a Time Stranger.
Yeah, are you having trouble thinking about the Time Strangers?
Yes.
This is interesting. So, I'm sorry, I didn't think that would actually happen. I've never tried to talk about it like this before. I've been a good boy so far. So, yeah, I guess we'll see.
I am not in the control group now because you're like fucking...
I hope the listeners are okay.
I hope so too.
So I guess we'll see how well this part of the podcast records. I'm sorry.
It's alright.
Well, anyway.
That's the thing. This is Bad Occult Podcast. Hold on. 0. Ooh.
Yeah, that's a spicy meatball. Now you know what happens when you do that.
Thanks, Rob. Is there anything else about time travel that you want to talk about?
Well, just that when it comes to the memory expansion and the time telescoping, it goes one way. You can keep expanding it, but you can't really reel it back in.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you're kind of like selectively editing things out, which is it won't apply to other people's memories.
Yeah.
So you don't know what you're vanishing away.
Oh goodness.
And also, don't try to fast forward reality.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work the other way. It doesn't work where you like shrink it up and make stuff go faster. This technique is only good for expanding and slowing things down.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure to like go back and sort of follow up on that.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah.
I thought Time Strangers was a very different thing.
Oh my gosh, what did you think it was?
Well, I was thinking it was like, you know, so there's a couple of things in sort of the conspiracy realm when it comes to time travelers, where like people show up in pictures that look exactly like someone way in the future, or they're like carrying technology that is very different than what's should be in the authenticated picture from the authenticated time period. Those kind of things.
That's what you bring to a Time Stranger meeting.
Okay.
That's Time Stranger bragging rights.
I got caught in a photo today.
And the thing is, you how do you prove that you did stuff, you know? And not just how do you prove that you did stuff, but who do you really talk to about it?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's
cool. So
yeah.
I kind of had the idea.
You did. The thing is, the club kind of moves and changes, and different people show up at different times, and a lot of people just sort of accidentally show up.
Okay.
So, it's like...
Great, we had an accidental meeting of the Time Strangers.
I think you could call it that. So I'd definitely say it's different every time.
Mm-hmm. Great.
So, there you go. That's the secret society that I made sure to tell you about very clearly.
Yes.
Have fun listening to this podcast and the beep boop that's happening as we're trying to talk. Let's see. I have some notes here, and I want to look over them for a second.
I do want to say I really appreciate that you brought notes to the podcast. Like it's great to see people who are prepared. It's always nice.
So,
Mm-hmm.
Something that happens, it's a little bit before the narcissism note. If you're time traveling, a lot of things have happened to you in the field of causality.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how it is. It's not gonna be clean. It's not gonna work out. Like if you scan the whole of your field of causality, if you kind of just look through all of your time travel memories at once or your alternate reality memories at once, it's gonna look like garbage if you just do a random glance.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't sort itself. It doesn't organize itself. And it doesn't edit itself.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to take that whole pile of footage and just start sifting through the memories and start like saying, this part, that's me. That's a thing that would happen to me. I can see how that's part of my reality. This part over here, that's warpy garbage that happened because of like space rays.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to make that call as a time traveler. Like, who is you? And when is you? And so, you start sorting through all of your causality, start sorting through your memories, your selves, whatever. Things will often organize themselves into kind of a story-like shape.
Mm-hmm.
You'll notice that it doesn't actually happen like you want it, though.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a self-organizing shape. Part of the way that narcissism often shows up is that it's very easy as a time traveler to notice when people repeat in your story.
Mm-hmm.
When you see the same person showing up across like different timelines or something like that, or if they just show up a lot in your own life. And so it's very easy to start like trying to fixate on those people to start understanding more about yourself as a time traveler. Or as a time traveler, it's very easy to seem like you're stalking them because you end up just sort of meeting them in happenstance sort of ways.
Yeah.
And especially if they're not actually, if they don't have any real understanding of time travel, they may start getting creeped out because they're like, how are you showing up in my life?
Yeah.
Like, no, really, there's no way you would know I was in this country right now. How are we here? And like, when you repeatedly have no explanation for it, it gets very awkward.
Yeah. I'm sure.
So, like, my experience of time travel is more stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's kind of hard to own your part in what's going on in your causality and your timeline.
Yeah.
Because, like, there's only so much that we can really own what's happening to us in any reality.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure as always to talk to you, Rob. Any final parting words for audience, anyone who might consider trying their first time jump?
Oh, if you're trying for your first, don't go for something you regret. I'd say if there's a memory you have that seems like it already has a couple of you in it, then just go ahead and go for that, because obviously you did that. Now you can know the other side of it.
Lovely.
Go for a sure bet.
Go for a sure bet. Well, thank you so much, Rob. Of course, you'd always say go for a sure bet.
Be kind to yourself.
Be kind to yourself. Oh, that's a good closer. All right. Well, again, thank you, Rob, for coming over from Mageville, Mage World, Ben's place, to talk with us about time travel and how he experienced it. And we're going to have Felix coming back here momentarily. We'll see. He's still getting settled. Rob went a lot of places this time.
0.
How are you feeling? Oh, you still gotta finish your stuff. So, let him check in on himself before I check in on him.
Okay. There we go.
There you go. How you feeling?
Oh, I'm alright, just kind of distracted.
Awesome.
He'd been wanting to. He was trying to figure out whether he should talk about time strangers for like I'd say fucking over a week. So
Yay!
he wasn't trying to punk you.
I just was like, alright, so this sounds like the warping stuff in the background. It sounds kind of like some of the Time Stranger stuff, and I was gonna, like, bring up the pictures and stuff, and then he went off in a different direction than I expected entirely.
I think partly because he was having trouble talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe there is something in there that's supposed to make you get annoyed about it and not pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure this episode's going to be very interesting to listen back to.
Yeah, I think it might actually be an example of telepathic hypnotism.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's usually how it goes. And in fact, whenever you encounter something like this, the best way to deal with it is to simply like keep trying to communicate with each other.
Yeah, and I mean, we're gonna talk about it more next episode. When it comes to, with Edward, when it comes to just the long-term stuff, like, but that's something that we had to do. Like, I would say even like on the podcast, to get like really real for a minute, like, we try our best to communicate in a way that is not distressing for the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we try not to argue. I mean, it was very awkward having that one episode with the methane. Because, like, one of the things that methane does to us is it makes us argue.
Oh, yeah, I got upset.
Yeah.
And kind of had to talk myself out of being upset.
But, like, I was having a similar reaction to Rob talking about the Time Strangers. Like, I was starting to get annoyed by the fact that how confused I was getting.
Yeah, and he was getting concerned.
Yeah.
So
I just want to note that as part of the podcast. Like, we have psychic effects. We have that exhibit as, like, mental and emotional effects.
Yeah.
So.
It's...
And that's part of the reason why I like to bring up that it's a bad occult podcast, because, like, this is probably not advisable for most people.
I think a lot of the things that we're trying out are a little hard to test otherwise.
Yeah.
For instance, he was having trouble bringing up the subject at all, and he had forgotten entirely about it by the time that you brought it up.
Really?
Yeah, the reason why he had actually asked someone else to give you a note to bring it up is because he knew that he was going to have trouble doing it himself.
I didn't even have a note about it.
Like...
I mentioned, like, the Time Strangers that I was thinking about. Like,
oh my gosh,
it was totally different. Yeah.
This is gonna bring people into the sausage making bit for a little bit. But earlier today, Rob and Ben were in these two bodies walking out in the woods, and Rob actually told Ben, like, hey, I want to talk about the Time Strangers to Tyler, but I'm having trouble bringing it up. Could you bring it up? Could you maybe pass the note to him, and then he can bring it up on the podcast? And the first time he asked, cars went by and Ben couldn't hear him. And so Rob had to repeat the request, and he said, Time Strangers. And Ben was like, okay, I'll pass it on.
Did Ben not know anything about, like...
Ben had no idea.
I have a personal association with the term Time Strangers.
Oh, that's interesting, because...
That's what I was talking about, was with the photos and stuff.
Rob's association with Time Strangers is the one he described.
Right.
His club.
What's your association with Time Strangers, Felix?
There's a manga called, like, Time Stranger... I don't remember the name of the girl, but it's like, like, she's like a time traveler.
Oh my god. So we all have different associations with the term Time Stranger.
Yeah, and Ben has none whatsoever. He even asked Rob, like, hey, is there anything about Time Strangers that you want to mention? And Rob's like, no, just bring up the term, I'll know what it is.
No clue.
I had no clue that there was a Time Strangers term in cryptid culture.
Oh my god.
So, like, yeah, Rob had no idea that he was bringing up something that you would have a previous association with.
Yeah. That is wild.
So I guess people have already heard of Time Strangers.
That is wild.
Before Rob brought up Time Strangers. Oh my gosh. That's wild. And he was having so much trouble, like he thought about it several times and he's like, no, I don't want to talk to people about a secret time club. That's going to sound too...
And then I just...
That's going to sound too much like I'm just making up a story that no one's ever heard of and there's no proof of.
And then I...
And oh my gosh. He thought he'd just be talking about something that no one's ever heard of. Because his only experience of it is being one! And that's apparently the thing they're calling each other.
Time Strangers.
Time Strangers. Yeah, because like the only way that they really meet is through this. That they don't have any other way of knowing each other because their lives don't intersect in any way but this particular thing.
Weird.
So it's like it's a very diverse group of individuals.
Yeah.
I've actually like not physically, but I've been there a couple of times.
Uh-huh.
Very cloudy dreams.
Mm.
It's very easy to accidentally get there.
Especially once you know about it.
It's like Speakeasy Narnia.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, great. We captured some interesting information, data for later analysis.
Yeah. It's wild to me that you have a completely different knowledge of Time Strangers separate from Rob telling you his about Time Strangers.
Uh-huh.
And
you
now,
have it.
Rob and I have had...
Yeah.
Have we talked about Rob and I's history on this podcast?
We have not, and we probably have to save it for another time.
How long do you feel like you've got left on this podcast?
Like 5-10 minutes.
Okay. Very fast. Rob and I have a long history.
Yes.
So I've kind of shoulder watched his cool stuff a lot, and I think that's basically how I managed to bump into Time Strangers.
Mm.
That was it.
Cool. So yeah, speaking of recording stuff to find out in the edit later,
oh boy,
you have a comic.
I do. I have Peacock Planet. Peacock Planet is where I take all of the stuff that we've talked about and all of the stuff that our visitors and guests...
All the world building implications of like what Ben or Rob casually mention about Mageville.
Well, for instance, I'll sit down and I'll channel one of our guests and they'll write some script for the comic. Mm-hmm. And not only will it have something very interesting that happened to them, but it will also happen to teach something about psychic ability or time travel.
It's so cool.
So it's automatic writing, automatic art, and it's updated periodically. Sometimes you might see several pages posted a day. Maybe there'll be a few days that go without updates, and then suddenly there's like a whole bunch.
Homestuck rules.
Homestuck rules. It's Homestuck rules. Can't do it any other way.
Nope.
So that's peacockplanet.tumblr.com.
Yeah. You're on chapter 2 right now.
Chapter 2. It's the time travel chapter.
I know we've got plot for like several more chapters, and I'm so excited for what's coming up.
Yeah, there's there's actual script for several chapters, and then plot for more beyond that. So yes. It's going to be pretty long running. Writing and illustrating some stuff that it's really nice to be able to explain things in this way, because sometimes it's really hard to talk about psychic ability and explain it without getting very experiential. Yeah. And so having a character that everybody can look at and see the experience of, and be able to discuss, like, I just feel like that helps as an example.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, our only other real example, and I mean, we'll probably have a whole episode on, like, psychic or time travel or magic or whatever in pop culture, and probably at least 2 episodes on Homestuck because, oh my god, there's so much there.
Metal Gear Solid.
Metal Gear Solid's another one. So yeah, that's like stuff that we have planned in the future. It's not all just going to be channeling and talking about these like greater concept. It's going to be like, this is what Metal Gear Solid can teach you about time travel.
This is what you can teach you about psychokinesis.
So yeah, as always, you can find us on badoccultadvice.tumblr.com, where we post a lot of other fun, occult, silly stuff. You can send us an ask on there, or you can send us an email at badoccultadvice@gmail.com. Anything else? We've got Twitch. Twitch time may be changing. Just letting people know, we haven't put announcements up for the past 2. For the 2 time travel episodes, we hadn't posted an announcement on the Tumblr, but we usually do that. But live on Twitch right now, our schedule is 9 p.m. PST on Sundays. We also upload, whenever we get a chance, the VOD of each episode on YouTube. Eventually, we're going to have audio only available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the places that you listen to your podcasts, Substack. Still working on that. Peacock Planet's sort of taken front and center.
Yeah.
Because it's important, damn it. Anyways, that's all the places that you can find us. Anything else you want to plug?
Time Traveler as in fuck you.
Yeah, go there.
.tumblr.com.
Yes. Venom, who we talked to last week, actually runs that Tumblr. There are going to be some Peacock Planet tie-ins. Like, this story is not just going to be on Peacock Planet. .tumblr.com. There are going to be pieces of it all over
the internet.
There is one link that you have. Surprise, we're making it an ARG. Choose your own ARG. Best way to put it.
Venom's writing the manuals.
Yes. Yes, he is writing the manuals.
He may not be the only one who writes the manuals, but he has definitely set it as a goal of his to write his version of the manuals, because he has
and these are
been the original author of the manuals for some of these organizations.
And just as a reminder, these are time travel manuals, so
yeah.
So that's going to be a lot of fun to see. Yeah, so this has been another episode of Bad Occult Podcast, where we did, or at least talked about, inadvisable things in the name of magical science. I have been, and will continue to be, Tyler Cadmian, aka Shadow.
This has been Felix S. Warren.
Goodbye.